The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai.
Hello, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and this is episode number 187. The coronavirus is still happening, so we sincerely hope that you are getting into treatment and getting your loved ones into treatment. When a person is addicted to drugs, the myriad of choices of treatments can be overwhelming. Narconon Ojai is a residential treatment facility that addresses the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of addiction with a proven, evidence-based, step-by-step program designed to free those trapped by addiction. For more information, call 1-866-231-5924. It's an anonymous phone call. They're there to help. 1-866-231-5924. Today we'll be talking to a gentleman named Duke Rumely. Duke is a former alcoholic and has been sober since 1989. When he went to music concerts, he found that the culture, if you will, was kind of geared toward drugs and alcohol. He went to see his favorite band, the Grateful Dead. He had seen them 15 times while using drugs and drinking. This time it was different, and he felt awkward and felt like he didn't fit in. He was with old friends, and they were kind and letting him hang with them, but he felt he was the odd man out. He found a sober support group called the Wharf Rats, and they held meetings at the intermission of the concert, and so he connected up with them. He has young adults as his children. They're not really children anymore, 20 and 17, and he doesn't want them getting drunk or high. So he formulated an organization to help them stay sober. And we're going to have him tell us more about his story and also about his organization. So without further ado, let's talk to Duke Rumely. So Duke Rumely, thank you so much for being on the podcast and being willing to tell your story. I think you have a very unique perspective in terms of what you're doing now. So thank you for being willing to share all the dirty details.
Right on. I think this is my first podcast, so I am super pumped to be able to do this, Joni. So thank you.
Well, welcome. You know, sometimes I have people and they say, oh, I'm kind of nervous. And I kind of go, I'm not a reporter. I'm really easygoing. I'm not going to ask you something that's hard, like when did you stop beating your wife? I don't do that.
I get to talk about me.
You get to talk about me and you, and specifically, I know that you have a history with alcohol. I don't know if that included drugs, but I want you to go back to the beginning and tell us your history and how you got started and all that.
Right on. Well, I do. I have a very intense history with drugs and alcohol. So, I think that's what happened. Very first time I was able to drink as much as I wanted. I was, I believe, a sophomore in high school. We went to a college party and they had a keg, and I had 2 beers, and I went from being the scared sophomore in high school to being a Notre Dame student. And then I had 2 more beers and I was on the Notre Dame football team. And then 2 more beers and I was the starting fullback at Notre Dame. And that's kind of how it escalated. And then I blacked out. And then I went to school on Monday and was told all these horrible stories. I was told I went around the room and told everyone I loved them, which was hard to believe until I saw somebody else do it. And then I got into a beer chugging contest. I went outside, threw up, and then just horrible night, right? No upside to this, but something happened in my mind where I became okay. I can't really explain exactly what it was, but something shifted, and I went from being kind of a scared kid to being cool. And there was this intense experience that kind of rewired my brain that I couldn't say no to drugs and alcohol, kind of going forward from that. And it was kind of like my main
how old
obsession.
were you then? How old were you then when you started?
So I think I was 16
okay.
or 17 years old. So that's kind of what happened to the brain, and then the behaviors, went from being a once a month to every weekend to a couple times during the week. And my parents spotted pretty early on. I mean, I just don't think blackout drinking is normal. And, especially when you have a young kid who is well below the age of being able to drink. So they took me to AA pretty early on, and they didn't know much about AA. They just more like took me to I just remember being super hungover, not being able to see across the room, and none of it made sense to me. Actually, my parents at first took me to church. They thought church would cure this. So I would be at Saturday morning mass at 6:30 in the morning, having to go outside and throw up in the bushes and then come back into church. So that didn't cure my alcoholism. So they took me to AA, and for about 4 years, I would go to a couple AA meetings per year to get the heat off. That was and I thought there might be some other way, right? I just needed to win the lotto, or I needed just the bad luck to stop. But I had this mind that had been totally altered from this intense experience with alcohol at a young age. And so I ended up attending the University of Arizona. I talked to my parents into letting me leave Indiana. And I left and brought a bunch of LSD with me out to Tucson, and was out having a new experience, and joined a fraternity when they told me not to join a fraternity. I mean, I was such a little shit. I mean, the stuff that they told me to I have kids now, and if my kids did what I've done, I think I would murder them. So
I completely understand. We went through our teenagers, and, no, you cannot drink and drive, and we'd look at each other and go, yeah, but I did it. Yeah, I did it. But that doesn't matter. They can't do it.
Right.
Duke, was LSD wasn't your first drug, was it?
No, I would say when alcohol, marijuana, probably cocaine, and then LSD. So this was all a bit of a late bloomer. It felt like to me, like I didn't start drinking until really like my sophomore year of high school, and had this intense experience, and then just the floodgates kind of opened. And
so you took LSD to Arizona. That's where you were.
Well, yes.
So when I interrupted you.
Right. So long story short, go out to the University of Arizona. Parents are like, hey, just get good grades. Don't join a fraternity your first semester. Join this fraternity. Nogales, Mexico is 30 miles away, where you don't need an ID. A bunch of my friends who were in the fraternity were into the Grateful Dead, started going to Grateful Dead concerts. And those were kind of my priorities. Grateful Dead concerts and going down to Nogales. And so I say I attended the University of Arizona and not graduated. So my sophomore year, I was down there for a Super Bowl party. And we drove down to Nogales the night of Super Bowl weekend, Friday night. And one of my fraternity brothers had fake $20 bills, which he didn't tell us about. And I blacked out in Nogales with this group of people. And at the end of the night, we're walking back to the bar, and I have a bit of a brownout. I remember bits and pieces of the night, so not all of it, but I do remember elbowing him and say, let's go back to my favorite bar before we go back to the car. And the federales were waiting for us. So we walk in, and, he is being accused of counterfeiting, and I have no idea what's going on. I think this is hilarious. This would be such a great story when we get back to school. And I'm watching my other fraternity brothers walk in and walk out. Like as soon as they see what's going on, they're out of there. So long story short, I mean, there's 1,000 stories in there, but we get arrested, put in jail. I don't speak any Spanish. And on Sunday, we get a call from the U.S. consulate. So we've now been in jail for 48 hours, missed the Super Bowl.
Okay. I just have to say, Duke, I have had many people on this podcast who have been arrested for drug-related activities. You are the first arrested for counterfeiting. I'm just saying.
Right. Well,
I'm just making a point.
There's some more first coming. You wait. So U.S. consulate calls. They end up calling my parents. Mom has to fly down. Mom starts negotiating my release. It's now like Wednesday. So we get thrown in jail Friday. 6 days later, they're like, if you want your son back, it'll be $25,000.
Because you're over the border. You're in Mexico, right?
Yes, we are in Mexico.
But I got it now.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And Mom says, keep them.
Oh.
Mom says, I got 4 other kids at home. This one's been a pain in my butt. So the next day they come back to her and counter at $4,000. So that's my trade-in value.
Oh my goodness.
So if I ever get drunk, she can take me back to Nogales, Mexico and get her $4,000 back. So I get deported and banned from the country of Mexico for 12 years. So I don't know how many people you know have been banned from Mexico.
Nobody. That's a first, right? Too. Good. Another first, Duke. Okay. Keep going.
So that wall we're building is to keep me out of Mexico. Oh. Yes.
Okay.
So Mom says, fly straight. I know it really wasn't your fault, but if you hadn't been drunk, this wouldn't have happened. So Mom's got some good non-codependent streak in her. So she leaves. And the following weekend, there's a party in San Diego. And I can't go because I've had this week of school to catch up on. And I'm so appreciative my parents just bailed me out of jail. But I see a keg get rolled onto this RV. And this happens, right? My mind changes its own mind. I've got this blank spot back there. And it's like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I have to say yes. So I get on the RV, we go to San Diego, we have a fun weekend. I go out drinking with a different fraternity brother on Saturday night. And we come back to the RV Sunday morning and it's gone. They've left us. They're heading back to Tucson. So we go out drinking that night. We're going to take I think a Greyhound bus home in the morning. But that night he realizes he can use his visa and fly in Southwest. So in the middle of a blackout, we switch planes. I come out of this blackout and there's alarms going off. I'm looking in the mirror. There's a joint in my hand. And I'm thinking I'm on a Greyhound bus, but I'm actually on an airplane. And I don't know what's going on. And I open up the door and look out. And there are 30 rows of people turned around staring. Why is there alarms going off on this airplane? And why does this airplane smell of smoke?
So and not only are you smoking on a plane, Duke, you're smoking marijuana on a plane.
So, yeah.
Another first for the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
So that is me not drinking. Mom says fly straight. I totally agree. I have this brain that's going to change its own mind. Once I take that drink, I have an abnormal reaction, which is I get thirstier, which I thought was normal, but it turns out it's not normal because I've had this discussion with my mom and she's like, look, why can't you just have 2 beers? And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I have 2 drinks. I know I catch that buzz. I know it's time to stop. And I'm like, for me, it feels like I'm in first gear going too fast. And I need to put the clutch in and put it into second gear. And then I feel like I need to go to third gear, fourth gear, invisible. And I just think that's kind of the different mentality of a addict alcoholic versus a normal drinker. And it's pretty basic, but that is kind of what I've come to realize what I have. So long story short, they didn't arrest me. The flight attendant had the pilot come down and speak to me. And I was so drunk, he sounded like a parent in Snoopy's, wah, 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 wah. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I kept saying it won't happen again. So, sorry. I wasn't even denying it. And we flew to LA, changed planes. They never said anything. And next thing you know, I am back in Tucson with another crazy Duke story. So, so a year later, my parents took me to treatment, and they took me on New Year's Eve of '88. And I told them nobody gets sober on New Year's Eve. So they asked me not to drink the month of January to prove I wasn't an alcoholic. and I lasted all of 8 days. So anyone who stays sober longer than 8 days, I think, has got some type of power in them. So I think that's kind of the trick, is how do we tap into some type of power that helps us get through this kind of mental compulsion? So I went to treatment May 15th of 89. I've been sober
What kind
ever
of
since.
treatment, Duke? What kind of treatment?
So I went to a place in Indiana called Renaissance, and it was kind of drug and alcohol treatment, talk therapy. After 8 days, they said I had a psychic shift and I could leave. So treatment was different back then. And I was still, completely obsessed with alcohol and drugs. I mean, I was so far from being on the other side of this thing. But I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous, and a buddy took me there. And actually, my parents took me there and had a good enough experience that I kept coming back. And then at 3 months sober, I moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And I really think the spirit of AA kind of grabbed me more than anything else. So I didn't have a car the first 2 years of my sobriety, and people were willing to pick me up and take me to meetings. And I recognized in my brain that I was still like geo mapping where all the bars were. This is even at 9 months sober. You drive by and your head turns, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? It's like, remember where this bar is, just in case this AA thing doesn't work out. Like, this bar looks shady, you can get drugs there. This bar looks really fancy, you can meet women there. Just kind of how the brain works. And it just took a period of time and good sponsorship and willingness to try the steps. But I also had a very loving, supportive family that was very helpful. There was a sober support group at Grateful Dead concerts called Wharf Rats, and that helped make sobriety seem really cool. So when I was so young, and just kind of this idea like, oh shit, there's other people like me who, I'm not the only one at this Dead show who isn't high on drugs or alcohol right now. And that was
Duke,
mind blowing.
I got that, and I understand that. I want to clarify, oftentimes when we talk to someone who's an addict, there's a huge aha moment. And I'm not saying you didn't have, you have to have that. I don't think you necessarily do. But was there a moment when you went, oh, I need to do something about this, or my life is not going to end up very well? Was there a moment that happened with you?
Yeah, I think kind of step 0 is that aha moment of, life might be okay without drugs and alcohol. That was as far as I could really get walking into treatment. Just like, I have flunked out of numerous colleges. I'm the black sheep of the family. The story of my arrest in Mexico was all over South Bend. And that was kind of one of the aha big moments, is like, life might be okay without it. Because up to that point, that was all I was wrapped up into. I mean, I had Budweiser Vans, I went to treatment in a Stroh's t-shirt, and, I was known for kind of a guy who always had weed. And just that moment of like, man, I have failed at this thing called life, and maybe it'll be okay without it, was as far as I could really see. And didn't picture it more than like 6 weeks. Like, yeah, I might be able to stay sober a month, but no more than 2 or 3 at the most. And here it is 31 years later.
Exactly. And very well done to you for being 31 years sober. Was there a moment during your, and maybe it was the concert, I don't know, but was there a moment when you realized that, you could live without alcohol?
It was probably like 6 or 9 months into sobriety. It felt like I came out of a blackout and I was like 4 months sober. I think that probably part of it was detoxing. Part of it, everything was so new and felt so weird and so raw. And I guess maybe picking up the kind of like that 9-month chip, thinking, I might be able to get like maybe a year. And, I was 21 when this happened. So what helped me was when I was living in Louisville, Kentucky at that time, there was a bunch of adolescent treatment centers. So being 21 in AA wasn't young. There was a bunch of 16, 17-year-old kids running around, and 18 and 19-year-olds who had, a couple of years of sobriety. And that was kind of a great moment of like, that self-pity card of you're too young was taken away when you kind of show up and, you're not the youngest kid there.
Wow. That's amazing that there were ones that young with years of sobriety behind them.
And there was a thing called Young People in AA, and they had conferences, and we would go to a conference. I think we went to Cleveland for the international one as a group, and it was mind-blowing. And then we went to New York City, and it was at Times Square and the Killer Hotel there, and just being around like 7,000, 8,000 other kids. And just like, wow, we got it figured out. Like, if you can get this disease in your rearview mirror, you can have a ton of fun.
Yep. You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more information on our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, visit their website at narcononojai.org. That's NARCONONOJAI.org. Or call 1-866-231-5924. That's 1-866-231-5924. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. And having a good time without the alcohol or the drugs. I think so often when someone is addicted to alcohol and drugs, they think that that's what you need if you're going to enjoy life. And the truth of the matter is, when you stop, you can just enjoy life without it. So, Duke, you're married, obviously, or you were married because you have 2 kids.
Correct.
Keep going with your story.
Okay, so ended up graduating from college, learned you could do that sober. Going to college sober is like cheating. I mean, it's definitely, at least it was for me. And got a job out of college trading NASDAQ stocks. Did that for a year until I put in some wrong orders and got fired, and then ended up moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I've moved a few times in my sobriety, and I just know how awkward and hard that can be. And, I think kind of getting back to the fun part of recovery, right? I mean, the downside is little, but the downside is life can be awkward at times. And that's why we enjoy alcohol and drugs, just to kind of help us through, the first 10 minutes at a party where you don't know anybody, right? And if you can get through that first 10 minutes, then it's not such a big deal. But we had, just kind of understanding. And, at 3 months sober, I was at Grateful Dead shows, and at 6 months and 9 months with buddies from high school. And what I learned was it was funner to go with sober friends. Actually, it's not true. It was fun to go with both groups, but it was sometimes good to have a sober wingman with you. And I wouldn't recommend that to everyone, but it was really important to me, because I think if I would have stayed home and been miserable, I would have used. So
makes sense.
I think there's, learning how to have fun in sobriety, because there's so much stigma attached to that. And I think that's why most people do relapse, right? They're miserable in sobriety. They don't know how to have fun. They think the fun will never come back if they're sober, and they go back to using.
I think you're right. And I think I was very interested to read, you mentioned it already, about the group, the Wharf Rats.
Yes.
And, I think that a group like that, it's valuable. But anyway, I digress.
No, it's true. I mean, it was mind blowing that, okay, where I want to be, there was recovery already there, right? And as somebody so new, I didn't know how to create it, but it was already there, and that was so helpful. So yes, end up getting married, having kids, stay sober through all of that, and kind of fast forward. My 2.5 years ago, my daughter is texting me from a concert venue saying she needs to take an Uber home. And being a concerned parent, I'm like, how much is that going to cost me? But my second thought was, what's going on? And she finally, after kind of back and forth, said, look, everyone I came here with took ecstasy, and I don't feel safe going home with them.
Wow.
And I've worked in the recovery field and have been sober long enough to know that my kids are at risk of overdosing and dying. They are at this 16 and 20-year-old range. We lose roughly 70,000 people to drug overdose every year, another 80 to 90,000 to alcohol deaths per year. I live in Colorado, which is a very pro-drug state.
Yep.
They like electronic dance music. That can be a very high, intense drug culture. So we started this nonprofit called Sober AF Entertainment. You know what AF stands for?
Wait a minute. Sober AF Entertainment. And fun?
Yes.
Really?
No. It can mean a lot of things.
Sober and fun entertainment, that works though, but what
yes.
does it mean?
No. So it technically doesn't stand for anything, the AF part.
Okay.
Because it's really sober entertainment, but nobody would show up if it was called sober entertainment. So, and AF typically means sober and F entertainment, or sober as F. That's funny. I don't even know my own name anymore. But it can mean a lot of things. It can mean sober and fun.
Sober as F. I don't know.
Sober as fuck entertainment.
Ah, okay. Got it.
So it's a good sign that doesn't connect with you, right? It means your mind is not in the gutter. It's good. So anyways, yeah, we're Sober AF Entertainment.
Okay.
And
Duke,
we have
a question. I have a question.
Sure.
I do. I definitely want to hear everything about your organization. I think it's fabulous. Did you ever ask your daughter, in an environment like she was in, and all of her friends that she's with are doing ecstasy, why did she say no? Do you know? I'm curious. I want to ask her.
Right. It's a great question, because she is we've had a couple of issues more with alcohol along the way. And it wasn't like my issues where it became repetitive, but it was about once every 2 years, I got called in I think our senior year of high school that she had been overserved, and her friends called me like, hey, can you come get Jordan? She's having a tough time, and showed up. And it's not like she hasn't partaken, and I know she had smoked some weed up to that point and was just really begging my kids, like, look, just wait till you're 21, right? Let your brain kind of connect a little bit. So why did she say no to ecstasy? I don't know. It's a great question. I'll ask her.
I would say well done, obviously well done her, but also well done you. We talk a lot about on the podcast how when a child gets addicted, the parent automatically thinks, it's something that they did wrong. And I don't think that that's true, but I do have an idea that you probably did a lot right with your kids.
Well, Joni, thank you for saying that. I totally have kind of like two rules in the house, right? And I said the house is sober, and which means no drugs, no alcohol, and nobody's getting pregnant. So those are kind of the two rules. And if you can follow those rules, you can go a long way in this house. And So with my son, he started hosting a poker night, like his freshman year of high school. And the kids all knew, like, this house is sober AF, right? We'll have Red Bull. They can vape if they want outside, but they can play poker until 3 a.m. But everyone has to stay sober. And I think, being kind of with my personality, being so out there with my own A, recovery, and B, belief that kids shouldn't get high or drunk until they're 21, really impacted his life, but also his buddy's life. So
that's awesome. That's so awesome. And I'm hoping that if parents are listening and they have young kids who, are experimenting or who already have experimented, to put in rules like that and have them be in the house and doing something that's fun but doesn't include alcohol or drugs. I think that's huge. So, okay, so again, I took you back, but you started SAFE, Sober
Yes.
AF Entertainment.
Yes.
How did you start? What did you do?
So we had this moment with my daughter. I'm 29 years sober, I think, at the time. And basically it was that magic wand moment. Like, what would you do if it was like unlimited resources? And I had worked in the treatment field as a marketer for 10 years. And I just know we're really good at getting them sober up until day 28, right? And then they leave treatment, and there's a lot of relapse, a ridiculous high amount of overdose deaths right out of treatment. And if you can get them to like year 1, the relapse rate really falls off. So we're trying to do the impossible. We're trying to make sobriety or recovery cool. There's this sober curious movement out there. So with this magic wand, we came up with the idea of sober tailgates at music festivals, concerts, and sporting events, and then a sober section inside the venue with half-off tickets.
Wow.
So
there's like a section inside the concert,
yes.
And it's half off, but do you ever have someone who does that half off and then try and get around it?
Well, we definitely get good seats. So we've negotiated really well, and we'll sell, a couple hundred tickets. I mean, it's pretty amazing seeing 250 people sit together for a baseball game sober. And then we'll have people slide into our seats because we got good seats, and we kind of self-police it, and it's pretty obvious. And people have been very respectful once you tell them, like, hey, this is a sober section. They're like, hey, sorry. And they get up. And
I just wondered if anybody who pays for your tickets decides to do that and then drink anyway. I just curious.
So I'm sure it's happened, meaning there's family members who come and it's a baseball game. And, we've had 4,000 people come to 64 events.
Wow.
Over the last 3 years.
That's awesome.
It really is. And here are some of the locations we went in 2019 when we used to be able to go to events.
Nice.
And some of the highlights were, we did Dead and Company. We've done a bunch of Colorado stuff, but we also left Colorado. We did Penn State at Maryland. So we threw a sober tailgate, and University of Maryland gave us all these discounted seats. And Penn State has a collegiate recovery community. 15 of their kids came down, and the nonprofit bought their tickets to the game.
Oh, wow.
And then Maryland had like 35 kids. So we had this killer tailgate. We had a big screen TV, tent, chairs, food, and that's one of the times people were trying to come in to our section or to our tailgate beforehand, because we had the big screen TV with the earlier games on.
Okay, I got to stop you. We got Super Bowl in Tampa. I think that's next year. Are you going to be there?
So if they allow us, yes.
Okay.
So what's the date? We're talking this coming February 2021?
I think so.
All right. You and me are going to make this happen.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So anyone who is on this podcast, they can reach out to us. We'll have more details to follow.
Yes. And I don't know anybody that is connected with Super Bowl, but if I can find somebody, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to reach out to the Buccaneers. I don't know if they'll be playing, but it's in their backyard. So
So
we're
more
hoping they'll
importantly,
be playing.
we don't always need tickets, right? We just
Right.
love the tailgate and a big screen TV to watch the game. So sometimes that has been the case. So we've done very high profile games like Notre Dame, Georgia, and we were not able to get any half off tickets, but we were able to throw a sober tailgate.
And Steve just pointed out, because I
Right.
forgot, one of the guys we've had on the podcast twice, who is a good friend, he is former Tampa Bay Buccaneer Randy Grimes.
All right.
And if we don't know who to talk to, I'm going to find out from Randy who we should talk to. I'm going to see if we can help on this because I think it's super important what you're doing.
Right. Well, right now, with all the churches being closed and the relapse rate being taken off, and we're so isolated, right? There has never been a time where it's been more important to be able to have some sober community. And I know we're all dying for it.
And you're doing something virtually, aren't you?
So we have, and we are going to continue it. So up until April 15th, we were rolling along. We had 200 people on New Year's Eve in a sober section for a Colorado Avalanche hockey game.
Wow.
Then we went across the street, and there's this really fun music festival called Decadence. And I want to say it's like 10 to 15,000 people, and they had all this EDM stuff, and we had a sober support tent inside of Decadence. And we had a great time. We were there 2 nights. They gave us 6 tickets for our volunteers. My daughter was a part of it, and she was sober on New Year's Eve up until midnight. And then at midnight, she gave me a kiss, said, all right, I'm no longer sober AF, and she took off with her friend. So I think she's got a very healthy relationship with alcohol. So she was 21 at the time also.
Fair enough.
Right. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And then COVID hits, and we were supposed to bring a game ball out to a Nuggets game with the state's attorney general and a senator. So we had this coming out party that I was really excited about, and that gets canceled. And next thing I know, everything is canceled that we do, and we're all kind of stuck inside. And we decided to do a virtual music festival. And we hired, I think, 60 different DJs and bands and showed it over 5 days. And we had 27,500 people watch this.
Wow.
So it was totally amazing. Every single band said, thank you, Sober AF Entertainment, and welcome to the Safe Music Festival. It was on Twitch. At one point, we were the most popular channel on Twitch, which is a big deal. So we did that in May. And then we had a second one in June, and we had a third one in July. And we had a total of 40,000 people watch all 3 festivals, and we had 130 bands. So, we had no idea what we were doing, but we were trying to create something, and it was really cool. But I think people got burned out of watching music stuff on their phones, right? This summer we had a lot of civil unrest. It just felt like people were no longer wanting to watch a music festival online, and we wanted to get outside. So since then, we're looking to restart the channel at the end of this month. So we'll have, instead of a 3-day, 50 bands, we're going to have just 2 hours and probably have 2 or 3 different DJs. And then what we've done in between, we've stitched in a PSA from either Miss America or the state's attorney general, SAMHSA, or suicide prevention, just trying to figure out how do we help the recovery community and anyone who's kind of stuck at home.
Yeah. And, I'm really glad to hear that you're looking to start up your virtual events again, because we're heading into the holidays, and the holidays, we know from past podcasts that we've done, are some of the most stressful, not only for you and me, but for people who, who are addicted or who have loved ones who are addicted. most stressful time of the year, hands down. And you bring into that mix the quarantine and COVID. I hesitate to mention the election. This is a non-political podcast, but
Right.
just the stress that's out there. I think if you guys can start up your virtual events again, I think it's huge, because I think it's going to be needed really now more than ever.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, we kind of went through a little lockdown in March. Was it March and April? As a society, like, and if it kicks back to that level, especially like with snow on the ground and people just miserable, I am really concerned about our community. So, and the cool thing about virtual, I mean, there's a lot of cool aspects to it, and there's some not so cool aspects to it, right? You don't get the same kind of connection that, if you're at a music festival with 10,000 people and you all get along, like that's a pretty powerful thing. But virtually, you can be anywhere. And, we've had people from all over the globe watching our music festivals and hearing, 130 different artists say the word sober was interesting, right? Some of them you could tell it rolled off their tongue, and other ones were like, they had never said the word before. So, so that's the goal. Our website is soberafe.com. The website for the music festival is safemusicfestival.com.
Okay, so soberafe.com is your website, and then Safe Music
Festival.
Okay.
.com is the website that you can click on and you go right to Twitch, which is our Safe Music Festival is what we hosted on Twitch. So
awesome.
Ideally, what this movement is going to be is a national do-it-yourself sober tailgate movement, where we host about 30 blowout events over the country, but we want ambassadors to go to the website, sign up. We'll send them a box, and it'll have balloons and T-shirts and kind of a policy and procedure, what to do if something happens, and people can host their own sober tailgates.
Oh, that's awesome. So I could have 25 people come to my house and we can watch what you do virtually, but we can all be sober in a group. I think that's awesome.
And you could even do like a Buccaneers game. So if you want to do a Tampa Bucks versus Steelers game and nobody's hosting it, you can go to the website, say, this is the 3 people, we're going to host it. We're going to be parking lot G, and look for the yellow balloons, because that's what Wharf Rats have used, and that's kind of the international sign of like a recovery at a music festival. If you see yellow balloons, that's usually a sober sign.
I didn't know that. Okay, yellow balloons. All right.
Yes.
What you're doing, I think is absolutely brilliant. Are you just doing this full time now? This is your total gig?
Correct. So I am doing this full time, been doing it full time for a little over 2.5 years. We've got a little grant money. I shouldn't say little. We've got grant money that really supports the cause. We're looking for more. Ideally, this should be a reality TV show with a RV driving all over the country at different music festivals and at different concerts and at different sporting events, where we drive into a town and we host a sober tailgate and everyone can learn about it.
Yep.
And
so we need to help you buy an RV. Is that the deal? We need everybody to go and donate and help you buy an RV so you can be at Super Bowl next time?
So, we've tried to see if there's any sponsorship money. Typically people are like, hey, that's really cute. Let us know when you have 400,000 people following you. So it's definitely a learning experience. And how do we take this movement that's a nonprofit and to be able to find a niche and then make the need a wanted need. And once then, I think it'll come. So, the amazing thing to me is I'll be on an airplane and the flight attendant will tell me she's heard of Sober AF Entertainment. And I'm like, probably not us, but go ahead. And then she tells me all about it. And it was us, right? And she's from a different state and she wanted to quit drinking, but she thought life would be over. And one of her friends emailed her an article about us. And I think of everyone who has been, there's another 100 or another 1,000 have heard about us. And to your point earlier, we were at UCLA, USC, we were at, we've been on East Coast, West Coast. We were at the Iron Bowl, Alabama versus Auburn. We were at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, which was Georgia, Florida. I mentioned the Notre Dame at Georgia game. And we haven't really run across anybody else who does both sporting events and music festivals. So
I just think it's amazing. I think it is huge. And you're so creative. You came up with a completely different way to help address this whole situation. And really, if I can evaluate for you, you're making sobriety popular and fun. And I think that has to be done. There's one thing to, have a full-on education, prevention, treatment, attack, if you will, on addiction needed. But how about making sobriety the thing to do and the thing to be? And I think that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I cannot thank you enough for being willing to tell us your story. You had a bunch of firsts for us.
Right. Yes.
And and really from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you and your kids and your family, what you're doing with Sober AF Entertainment.
Nailed it.
I have to say it many times. Sober AF Entertainment.
Yes.
Duke, thank you again so much for taking the time and being on the podcast today. I cannot thank you enough.
Well, I think this is like a no smoking section 30 years ago, right? It's this crazy idea, but 15 years from now, you'll be able to buy a ticket. It's like, you want to be in the sober section or the non-sober section. And it seems crazy, but I think at some point, we're, as a society, going to kind of make that jump that shark and realize that, we all want to stay healthy and be away from whiskey drunk guy. I'd be willing to pay a $2 premium to stay away from him.
I think you're right. Awesome. Thank you again so much, Duke.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai. For more information on Narconon Ojai, call 866-231-5924 or visit www.narcononojai.org. Narconon is a non-12-step rehabilitation program based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard.